In a pivotal encounter of the 1960 World Chess Championship, the attacking genius Mikhail faced off against the formidable world champion Mikhail Botvinnik. This game, marked by daring sacrifices and strategic shifts, became a critical moment in the match, ultimately swaying in Botvinnik's favor. Tal kicks off the game with the standard king's pawn opening, e4, immediately staking a claim in the center. Botvinnik responds with the solid Caro-Kann defense, c6, preparing to challenge white's central control. Tal continues to expand in the center with d4, forming a strong pawn duo and dictating the early stages. Botvinnik immediately strikes at white's center with d5, characteristic of the Caro-Kann defense. Tal develops his knight to c3, supporting the e4 pawn and adding pressure to the d5 square. Botvinnik captures the e4 pawn, opening the d-file and initiating exchanges in the center. Tal recaptures on e4 with his knight, maintaining a central presence and developing a piece. Botvinnik develops his light-squared bishop to f5, eyeing white's queenside and putting pressure on the d3 square. Tal moves his knight to g3, challenging Botvinnik's active bishop on f5 and forcing a decision. Botvinnik retreats his bishop to g6, maintaining its diagonal and keeping an eye on the kingside. Tal develops his other knight to e2, preparing to support central advances or maneuver to the kingside. Botvinnik develops his knight to f6, a precise choice that immediately attacks white's e4 pawn. A premature nf4 would have run into white's e5 push. Tal advances h4, creating space on the kingside and threatening to further harass black's bishop. Botvinnik pushes h6, preventing h5 and giving his bishop a retreat square if needed. Tal brings his knight to f4, now able to target the g6 bishop effectively, which black cannot allow to be taken. Botvinnik retreats his bishop to h7, maintaining its activity and avoiding exchanges. Tal develops his bishop to c4, putting pressure on black's f7 square and preparing for kingside castling. An alternative e5 push would have been met by queen moves by black. Botvinnik plays e6, solidifying his center and preparing to develop his kingside pieces. Tal castles kingside, bringing his king to safety and connecting his rooks. A nd5 move would have been met by nd7, simplifying the position. Botvinnik develops his bishop to d6, eyeing white's kingside and preparing for potential exchanges. There were few better options to avoid the upcoming complications. Tal unleashes next 6, a genuine sacrifice that opens lines and creates attacking opportunities, a testament to his deep preparation. Botvinnik accepts the moves, capturing with fec 6, which opens the f-file for his rook. Tal recaptures with b6, planting his bishop on a strong, central square. This move prevents black from castling and opens the e-file for white's rook, despite giving up a piece for 2 pawns. Botvinnik develops his queen to c7, looking to activate it and connect his rooks. Tal believed developing the b8 knight first would have been a safer choice for black. Tal plays 1 rupee, activating his rook on the open e-file and putting pressure on black's uncastled king. An alternative kd8 by black would have been a pointless attempt to find safety. Botvinnik brings his knight to d7, preparing to connect his rooks and reinforce his kingside defenses. Tal delivers a dramatic bg8+, a genuine sacrifice that checks the king and aims to disrupt black's setup. However, white's pieces were not quite coordinated enough to follow through on the attack. Botvinnik expertly moves his king to f8, avoiding the more exposed d8 square and finding a safer retreat. Tal recaptures the bishop on h7 with bx-h7, simplifying the position and picking up a pawn. Playing bxg3 would have allowed black to regain the advantage with bg6. Botvinnik recaptures the bishop with rxh7, bringing his rook into the game and maintaining material balance. Tal brings his knight to f5, a strong square that was part of his deep opening preparation. He felt this move made white's position much easier to play, given black's awkwardly placed rook and white's simple plan. Botvinnik plays the precise g6, attempting to dislodge white's active knight and reinforce his kingside. Tal makes another genuine sacrifice with bxh6+, picking up a pawn and maintaining the initiative against the black king. Botvinnik moves his king to g8, creating an escape square and preparing to consolidate his position. Tal captures the bishop on d6 with nxd6, exchanging pieces and further simplifying the board. Tal considered a rxh6 move here for black as part of a trap. Botvinnik recaptures with qxd6, gaining 3 pawns for the move's piece, effectively ending white's attack. Tal, disappointed with the lack of a decisive blow, began to lose confidence. Tal activates his bishop to g5, putting pressure on black's f6 knight and looking for activity. Botvinnik plays re7, activating his rook and preparing to defend against any further e-file pressure. This move ensures black faces no immediate difficulties. Tal moves his queen to d3, correctly fighting for control of the d-file, though he admits his confidence was already shaken. Botvinnik moves his king to g7, seeking safety and preparing to bring his king into the endgame. Tal believed f4 was a better move for white, despite engine evaluations. Tal plays the blundering qg3, a genuine sacrifice of his queen which he himself considered the weakest move of the entire match. He admitted to making it out of negativity towards all continuations. Botvinnik captures the rook on e1 with rex 1+, delivering a check and swiftly punishing Tal's mistake. Tal recaptures the rook on e1 with rex 1, bringing his other rook into play. Botvinnik captures Tal's queen with qxg3, gaining a massive material advantage. Tal recaptures the queen with fxg3, now facing a significant material deficit. His kingside pawn majority is rendered useless, and the piece disadvantage will be keenly felt. Botvinnik activates his rook to f8, preventing white's king from becoming active on the kingside. This move isolates the white king from the rest of the board. Tal pushes c4, attempting to create queenside pawn activity and fight for space. Botvinnik activates his knight to g4, putting pressure on white's kingside pawns. Tal advances d5, sacrificing the pawn in a desperate attempt to create counterplay and open lines, as he has no better options. Botvinnik captures the pawn on d5 with cxd5, accepting the material and maintaining his advantage. Tal recaptures the pawn with cxd5, creating a passed pawn on the d-file. Botvinnik repositions his knight to f6, preparing to restrict white's kingside pawns and participate in the defense. Tal pushes d6, advancing his passed pawn and aiming to create a dangerous threat. Botvinnik plays rf7, ensuring white's passed pawn won't advance past the 6th rank. The rook effectively neutralizes the pawn's threat. Tal brings his rook to c1, looking for activity and supporting his pawn. Botvinnik moves his rook to d7, reinforcing the defense of his d-pawn and restricting white's pieces. Tal sacrifices his rook with rc7, forcing an exchange and hoping to simplify into an endgame where he might have better chances. Botvinnik accepts the moves, moving his king to f7, positioning it closer to the center. Tal captures the knight on f6 with bxf6, exchanging pieces and further simplifying the position. Botvinnik recaptures the bishop with nxf6, bringing his knight to a central square and freeing it for further maneuvers. Tal brings his king to f2, trying to activate it and bring it closer to the action. Botvinnik maneuvers his king to e6, centralizing it and preparing to support his knight. Tal captures the rook on d7 with rxd7, continuing to simplify the board and remove more pieces. Botvinnik recaptures the rook with kxd7, bringing his king directly into the center. White has no chances with rooks on the board, and black's knight on f6 restricts white's kingside pawns. Tal moves his king to f3, trying to improve its position and prepare for the endgame. Botvinnik captures the d6 pawn with kxd6, eliminating white's passed pawn and cementing his material advantage. Tal brings his king to f4, attempting to activate it and potentially support his kingside pawns. Botvinnik moves his king to e6, maintaining a central presence and controlling key squares. Tal pushes g4, sacrificing the pawn in a desperate attempt to create counterplay or activate his king. Botvinnik checks the king with nd5+, forcing white's king to move. A kg5 move by black would lead to a more complicated endgame. Tal moves his king to e4, escaping the check and trying to get it to a more active position. Botvinnik checks the king again with nf6+, continuing to harass white's king. Tal retreats his king to f4, looking for a safe square. Botvinnik delivers another check with nd5+, demonstrating his knight's strong central position. Tal moves his king to e4, again escaping the check. Botvinnik plays nb4, maneuvering his knight to target white's queenside pawns. Tal plays a3, a questionable move that weakens his queenside pawns. Playing a4 instead would have led to a drawn position by avoiding easy targets for black's knight. Botvinnik brings his knight to c6, positioning it to attack white's vulnerable queenside pawns. Tal pushes h5, sacrificing yet another pawn in a final effort to create a passed pawn and fight for a draw. Botvinnik pushes g5, ensuring white's h-pawn cannot advance further and trapping it. Tal advances h6, a sealed move and his only practical chance for a draw. This pawn push forces black's king to capture it, but it's a technical conversion from here for Botvinnik. Botvinnik moves his king to f6, preparing to capture the advanced pawn. An alternative h7 would lead to a straightforward win for black. Tal moves his king to d5, attempting to get his king more active on the queenside. Botvinnik repositions his king to g6, closer to the passed pawn. Tal brings his king to e6, trying to control central squares. Botvinnik plays na5, bringing his knight closer to the queenside pawns and preparing to capture them. Tal pushes a4, attempting to create a passed pawn on the queenside. Playing this move earlier might have offered valuable tempo. Botvinnik plays nb3, immediately attacking white's queenside pawns. Tal moves his king to d6, trying to defend his pawns. Botvinnik advances a5, creating a passed pawn of his own and forcing white's king to respond. Tal retreats his king to d5. He loses too much time trying to remove Botvinnik's knight, preventing him from exchanging all the pawns for a draw. Botvinnik captures the h6 pawn with kxh6, consolidating his material advantage and securing a winning endgame. Tal moves his king to c4, trying to defend his remaining pawns. Botvinnik brings his knight to c1, preparing to capture the b3 pawn. Tal moves his king to b5, trying to defend his a-pawn. Botvinnik moves his knight to d3, continuing to harass white's pawns. Tal pushes b3, trying to create counterplay or open a path for his king. Botvinnik brings his knight back to c1, eyeing the b3 pawn. Tal captures the a5 pawn with xa5, winning a pawn but leaving his king exposed. Botvinnik delivers a final check with nxb3+, capturing another pawn and solidifying his decisive material advantage. A move like kb6 by Botvinnik would not work as well due to white's response.